"You're not worth anything anymore, Robert. It's over." Those were the words Elizabeth used before closing the ranch door, leaving behind her husband of 20 years and the smell of dust and cattle. She was trading him in, and not for just anyone. Elizabeth chose Brandon, a city lawyer, full of fancy words and with an imported car that shone brighter than the Texas sun. Robert, the cattle rancher, the man who built his empire with his own hands, was now just the old man. The problem is universal. Money or the lack of it shows who really stands by your side in difficult times. Elizabeth and the lawyer celebrated Robert's downfall. They laughed, thinking they had gotten the best out of life, leaving the countryman behind. What they didn't imagine, not even in their worst nightmare, is that every tear from Robert, every piece of land sold in a hurry, every head of cattle auctioned for scraps, was part of a plan. The old man's bankruptcy wasn't an accident. It was a trap. And in this story, you'll discover how the cattle rancher used country intelligence to teach the man of law a lesson. If you like a good comeback story, go ahead and leave your like to help our channel grow. Comment below your name and where you're watching from, so I know how far this story has reached. And most importantly, subscribe and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss what happens at the end. Today's story is about Robert, a man who seemed to have lost everything, but who was in fact in control all along. Robert was a man of the land. He woke up before the sun, not out of obligation, but out of habit. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the cool morning air, and in the distance, the sound of cattle starting to move was his favorite music. At 58 years old, his skin was marked by the Texas sun, and his hands were thick, calloused from tool handles and horse reins. He had built his wealth from scratch. He started with 3 cows, and today owned thousands of acres of land, herds that stretched as far as the eye could see, and valuable contracts with the biggest buyers in the country. But anyone who saw Robert in his daily work, with his dusty boots and simple plaid shirt, would never say he was one of the richest men in the county. He was a cattle rancher and was proud of it. On the other side of the house, in the master bedroom, Elizabeth only woke up after 9. Her bedroom window had thick curtains that blocked out the sunlight and, according to her, the smell of the corral. Elizabeth was in her early 50s, but spent a small fortune on creams and treatments to look 40. She wasn't born on the ranch. She came from Dallas and married Robert when he was just starting out. She liked the results of Robert's money, but hated the source. She hated the dust that stuck to the furniture, the mud that stained the porch floor, and most of all, her husband's simple ways. For her, what good was having so much money if Robert insisted on living like a farmhand? In recent months, Elizabeth's dissatisfaction had become almost palpable. She spent hours flipping through decorating magazines, dreaming of an apartment in Houston, far from all of this. Robert, noticing his wife's sadness, tried to please her, bought jewelry, suggested trips, but she always refused. "I don't want to travel only to come back to this middle of nowhere, Robert. I want to change my life," she would say. He sighed, but didn't know what to do. The ranch was his life, his legacy. The crack that was small began to widen on the day of the annual county fair. It was an important event where rural producers and urban businessmen mingled. Robert, as always, wore his best suit, although he felt uncomfortable in the outfit. Elizabeth, on the other hand, shone. She wore an expensive dress and jewelry that made other women sigh. It was at this party that she met Brandon. Brandon was the opposite of Robert, a lawyer, spoke smoothly, wore imported cologne and had smooth, manicured hands. He approached Elizabeth with a glass in hand and a calculated smile. "With all due respect, ma'am, it's a shame to see such an elegant lady in such a rustic environment." Elizabeth, who should have been offended, felt understood. They talked for almost an hour. Brandon spoke of life in Houston, of international travel, of complicated legal cases where he always came out victorious. Robert, meanwhile, was on the other side of the hall, talking about cattle prices and weather forecasts. That night, returning home in Robert's sturdy pickup, the silence was heavy. Elizabeth looked out the window but didn't see the landscape. She saw Brandon's imported Mercedes. "He's so intelligent, isn't he?" "Dr. Brandon," she said casually. Robert, who was tired, just mumbled, seemed arrogant. Elizabeth turned her face to him, offended. "Arrogant, he's polite. Something these people here don't know what that is." Robert didn't respond. But that night, something changed. He began to observe his wife differently. He saw the new cell phone she bought and didn't want him to touch. He heard calls from friends she answered quietly, locked in the bedroom. Robert was a simple man, but he wasn't a fool. He knew how to read the signs of weather, and he knew how to read the signs of people. 2 weeks later, Robert called Elizabeth for a serious conversation on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the Texas sky orange. He looked dejected. "Elizabeth, things aren't going well," he began. "Last year's drought was very severe. I lost a lot of heads, and that investment I made didn't work out." Elizabeth, who was filing her nails, stopped. "What do you mean?" "It didn't work out." "I'm having difficulties, Elizabeth. I had to take out a large bank loan, and I might have to sell part of the land." Elizabeth's face went pale, but not from concern for her husband. It was anger. "Sell? Sell what?" "You're kidding me, Robert. After all these years, you're going to tell me we're poor?" "I didn't say poor, Elizabeth. I said having difficulties. We're going to have to tighten our belts." "Tighten our belts," she repeated, her voice rising. "I'm not tightening any belt. You figure it out. You're the man of the house. Solve it." She got up and went inside, slamming the door. Robert stayed alone on the porch, watching nightfall. A small smile, almost imperceptible, appeared at the corner of his lips before disappearing. The plan had begun. That same night, Elizabeth sent a message to Brandon. "I need to talk to you, urgent. I think my husband is going broke." On the other side of the line in Houston, Brandon read the message and smiled. Interesting, he thought. Very interesting. The trap was being set, but the prey still didn't know who the hunter was. Robert could smell betrayal in the air, as certain as he could smell rain before it fell, and he wasn't going to be caught by surprise. He was going to control the storm. The days that followed were filled with tension you could cut with a knife. Robert began to act his part with a mastery he didn't even know he possessed. He, who had always been the first to rise, now seemed to linger in bed longer, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He spent hours in the ranch office, a small, dusty room, surrounded by papers he pretended to read desperately. He purposely left some overdue bills on the table where Elizabeth could see them. Elizabeth, in turn, watched everything with a mixture of panic and contempt. Where before she had seen strength, now there was failure. The man who built an empire seemed to be crumbling before her eyes, and she didn't feel sorry. She felt anger. Anger that he had allowed this to happen. Anger that she had wasted her best years beside a man who, in the end, was just a cattle rancher. "Robert, what does this mean?" she asked one morning, holding a paper with the bank's logo. It was a debit notice that Robert had printed in town at a print shop owned by an old friend who owed him favors. "It's what it looks like, Elizabeth. The bank wants payment. If I can't renegotiate, they're going to take the ranch," he said, lowering his head and rubbing his face with his hands, a gesture of pure exhaustion. "Take the ranch, and where are we going to live?" "Under a bridge," she screamed, not caring if any employee heard. "Calm down, woman, I'll figure something out. I'm thinking of selling that prize-winning herd, the elite cattle. It'll hurt, but it might cover the worst of it. Sell the elite cattle." For Elizabeth, this was the final confirmation. That herd was Robert's pride, the animals that won all the fairs. If he was willing to sell them, the situation was more serious than she imagined. What she didn't know was that Robert was actually selling the herd to a shell company he himself had created in Montana under the name of his trusted accountant, Sam. The money would just change pockets, but to the world it would seem like a desperate sale. While Robert acted out his despair, Elizabeth intensified her meetings with Brandon. Coffee with friends became a routine 2 to 3 times a week. She drove to Houston, went straight to his law office, a mirrored building downtown. "He's lost, Brandon," she would say, sitting in the soft leather chair while he served her a glass of imported mineral water. "He's going to sell the elite cattle. He said the bank is going to take everything." Brandon listened attentively, his calculating eyes fixed on her. He wasn't a fool. He knew Robert's fortune was old and solid. A drought wouldn't bring down a man like him, but Brandon's greed spoke louder. What if it were true? What if Robert was really in a hole? His wife Elizabeth was an attractive woman, and she clearly admired him. More importantly, if she divorced now, before bankruptcy was complete, she would still be entitled to a good half, and he could manage that half. "Elizabeth, dear," he began, using a paternal and seductive tone, "this is very serious. You can't sink with him. You need to protect your future. As your lawyer and your friend, I advise you to think of yourself." "Think of myself? How?" "By asking for divorce," she asked, her eyes widening at the boldness of the idea. "No, not yet. That would be too obvious. But you need to start protecting yourself. You need to know exactly what he has and what he owes. Do you have access to his documents?" "Some. He lives locked in that office, but I can try." "Do that," said Brandon, lightly touching her hand on the table. "I want to help you. You deserve more than a life of worry about cattle debts." That night, Elizabeth returned to the ranch with a dark determination. She waited for Robert to go out for his nightly rounds, something he did religiously, and went to the office. The door was locked. This was new. Robert never locked the office. She felt a chill. What was he hiding? She didn't know that Robert was watching her from the kitchen window. He saw her try the doorknob. He knew Brandon was instructing her. The hardest part of the plan was underway, making Elizabeth and Brandon believe they were in control, that they were being smarter than the old man. The next day, Robert held the auction of the elite cattle. It was a sad event, or so it seemed. Some buyers, Robert's longtime friends, came to place their bids. What no one knew is that the final buyer, who placed the highest bid by phone, was Sam, the accountant, using a fake name. The money was transferred to Robert's account, immediately passed to the bank to pay the non-existent debt. In everyone's eyes, Robert had sacrificed his greatest pride to save his skin. Elizabeth watched it all from afar, from the house porch. She saw the transport trucks taking away the prize bulls. She didn't feel sadness for her husband's loss. She felt disgust at his weakness. He was selling what they had that was most valuable. He sold Brandon. "Sold everything," she said on the phone later, locked in the bathroom. "I heard. The whole county is talking about it," Brandon replied. "Elizabeth, listen. I talked to a contact of mine at the bank. The situation is ugly. The debt he paid was just the tip. He has 2 more huge ones. He mortgaged the ranch. This was a lie from Brandon. He had no contact, but he needed to speed up Elizabeth's decision. Mortgaged?" Her voice failed. "Yes. The house where you live, Elizabeth, he's not going to recover. And when the bank takes the house, you won't be entitled to anything. You need to leave now." The silence on the line lasted a few seconds. Robert, who had tampered with the house's phone wiring and was now listening to the conversation on another device in the workshop, felt his heart grow heavy. He expected this, but hearing the betrayal unfold was painful. "What do I do?" she asked Brandon, her voice choked not with sadness but with fear of becoming poor. "Pack your bags. Come to Houston. You can stay with me. Tell him you can't take the pressure anymore. Tell him you need time. When the dust settles, we file for divorce and take what's left." "Are you sure?" she asked. "Absolutely. I'll take care of you." Robert hung up the phone. His hand trembled, not with anger, but with a deep and cold disappointment. He loved that woman. He truly loved her. But the woman he loved no longer existed, if she ever did. Now it was time to go all the way. He left the workshop and went to the living room. He sat in his worn leather armchair and waited. He knew she wouldn't take long. The second part of the plan, the most painful, was about to begin. It didn't take even an hour. The sound of suitcase wheels dragging across the wooden floor of the house was the first sign. Robert remained seated in his armchair, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on a point beyond the window, where darkness was beginning to take over the pastures. He didn't turn around when Elizabeth entered the room. She was dressed in her best city outfit, hair done and makeup flawless. She carried a large suitcase and her handbag. "What is this, Elizabeth?" he asked, his voice calm, feigning surprise. Elizabeth stopped at a safe distance. She expected screams, expected him to beg, but his calmness unsettled her. "I'm leaving, Robert," she said, trying to sound firm. "I can't take it anymore. I can't take this uncertainty. I can't watch you destroy everything we built." "Destroy?" he repeated, finally turning his face to look at her. His eyes were sunken, tired. "I'm trying to save what's left, woman. I thought you were with me on this." "Well, you thought wrong," she exploded, the facade of calm crumbling. "You never listened to me. I told you to sell this ranch years ago when it was still worth something. I told you to go to the city, live like people, but you and your pride, your love for this dust, for these animals, look where this got us." She gestured around at the house, which, despite the situation, was still large and comfortable, but in her eyes was now a prison. "I'm not going to sink with you, Robert. I'm not going back to being poor. I sacrificed my youth here. I'm not going to sacrifice my old age." Robert watched her in silence for a long moment. He now saw, with crystal clarity, the woman before him. She wasn't the young woman he married, full of dreams. She was a stranger, with cold, calculating eyes. The pain he felt hearing her call with Brandon had transformed into a cold resolution. "And where are you going?" he asked, although he already knew the answer. "I'm going to a friend's house in Houston. I need time to think, away from here." "A friend," he repeated without emotion. "I see." He stood up. Elizabeth instinctively took a step back. He was a large man, and even defeated, his presence filled the room. He walked slowly toward her. She held her breath, expecting confrontation, but Robert just stopped and looked deep into her eyes. "Are you sure, Elizabeth? Life out there isn't easy, especially when you don't have my support." It was a last chance, a final test. If she hesitated, if she showed an ounce of loyalty, maybe he would reconsider. Elizabeth, however, interpreted the question as weakness. He was afraid of being alone. He needed her. This gave her courage. "I don't need your support, Robert. And frankly, what support can you give me now? You have nothing left." She pulled the handle of the suitcase. "Now, if you'll excuse me, my Uber is waiting at the gate." She turned and started to walk. "Elizabeth!" he called. She stopped, but didn't turn around. "What? You're forgetting something," she turned, irritated. "What? My jewelry is all here." Robert shook his head. "No, you're forgetting who I am. You can go, but this door, once you pass through it, it doesn't open again." Elizabeth laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "Don't worry, I don't intend to come back." And then she delivered the final blow, the phrase she and Brandon had rehearsed. "You're not worth anything anymore, Robert. It's over." She turned and left. Robert followed her with his eyes. He watched her descend the porch steps, dragging the suitcase along the dirt path. He watched her struggle with the weight of the luggage, she who wasn't used to carrying anything. He didn't move to help. He stood there on the doorstep while she walked away. She reached the gate where a car, not an Uber but Brandon's imported Mercedes, parked in the shadows, out of sight of the house, was waiting for her. Brandon got out, opened the trunk with a triumphant smile, stored her suitcase, and opened the passenger door like a gentleman. Elizabeth got in without looking back. The car turned around and disappeared down the dirt road, raising dust. The main house door, which Robert said wouldn't open, slammed in the wind. Robert closed his eyes. The pain was real. 20 years of marriage, thrown away by greed, but the plan needed to continue. Now came the hardest part, public humiliation. He went back inside, went to the office, and picked up the phone. He called Sam, his accountant. "She's gone, Sam, just as you predicted." "I'm sorry, Robert," said his friend's voice on the other end. "And now we execute phase 2. Start the official bankruptcy, sell the pickups, sell the tractor, put the main house up for sale. I want the news to spread like wildfire. I want everyone, especially Dr. Brandon, to know I'm at rock bottom. I want them to be absolutely certain they've won." "And you, Robert, where are you going to stay?" asked Sam, worried. "I'm going to the foreman's house out back, that little house no one's used in years. It's time for the old man to learn to live with little." He hung up, looked around the large room, at the expensive furniture Elizabeth had chosen, at the portraits on the wall. With his own hands, he took down a wedding portrait from the wall, looked at young Elizabeth's face, sighed, and threw the portrait in the trash. The door was indeed closed, and Robert, the cattle rancher, was ready for the next act. The news of Robert and Elizabeth's separation fell like a bomb in the small county. In less than 24 hours, nothing else was talked about. The narrative that formed, skillfully fed by Brandon, was that poor Elizabeth couldn't handle the pressure of her husband's bankruptcy. He blamed her for everything, Brandon told his friends at the Houston club with an expression of false compassion. A man who loses his fortune often loses his mind along with it. She had to leave to protect herself, and Elizabeth, beside him, played the victim's role perfectly. She wore discreet but expensive clothes and maintained an expression of contained sadness. Within a few weeks, she officially moved into Brandon's luxurious apartment, a place with glass walls and a skyline view. It was everything she had always dreamed of. Brandon treated her like a queen. Dinners at the most expensive restaurants, new clothes, jewelry. He was investing in her, certain that the return would come when Robert's divorce was finalized and they managed to extract what was left from the old man. "We have to act fast, dear," he would say while signing the check for an expensive wine. "As soon as bankruptcy is declared, we file the lawsuit. We get your half before the creditors get everything." Elizabeth agreed happily. She paraded through town arm in arm with Brandon, feeling looks of envy and pity. Envy for the life she had now, and pity for the tragedy she had lived with Robert. She loved every second. Meanwhile, at the ranch, the scenario was the opposite. Robert's bankruptcy was visible and brutal. Following instructions, Sam, the accountant, had put the main house up for sale. A moving truck, actually Robert's employees, came and emptied the house. The expensive furniture was taken to a secure storage in Oklahoma. The ranch pickups and the newest tractor were sold at a public auction and again bought by Robert's shell companies. In the world's eyes, Robert was being plucked clean, and he, Robert, moved to the shed. It was an old foreman's cottage at the back of the property, near a stream. The place had been abandoned for years. It had 2 rooms, a bathroom, and a small wood-burning kitchen. The roof leaked, the walls were moldy, and it smelled of abandonment. Robert, the man who owned thousands of acres, began to renovate the place with his own hands. He was seen in town buying a few tiles, a bag of cement, and a can of cheap paint. He drove his oldest pickup, one he kept for sentimental value, but which now seemed to be all he had left. The former employees, with tears in their eyes, were fired. Robert called them one by one. "I can't pay you any more. Things got tight," he would say with a choked voice. What no one knew was that each of them left with 6 months' salary advanced in cash. paid under the table, with the promise it was a temporary layoff. Stay home, rest, but don't look for another job. When I call, I want you back. All agreed, loyal to the boss who had always been fair. Now Robert did the work alone. He was seen fixing fences, herding the little cattle that remained, the less valuable herd he purposely left behind, and living like a hermit. The public humiliation was complete. The people who once revered him now looked at him with pity. Poor Robert lost everything, his wife, the ranch. Elizabeth made a point of seeing it with her own eyes. One Sunday afternoon, she asked Brandon to take her to pick up some things left behind. Actually, she wanted to gloat. They stopped Brandon's imported Mercedes in front of the main house, now empty and with a for sale sign. "My God, how depressing," said Elizabeth with a mocking smile. "Let's see his new palace," Brandon mocked. They drove down the dirt road to the shed in the back, and what they saw was for them the image of defeat. Robert was in front of the cottage, shirtless, sweaty, nailing a loose board on the porch. He was thinner, unshaven. The old pickup was parked next to it, with a flat tire. Elizabeth rolled down the window. "Good afternoon, Robert. I see you're adapting to the new reality." Robert stopped what he was doing. Sweat ran down his face. He looked at the luxury Mercedes, at Brandon's smile at the wheel, and at the woman who was once his. He showed no anger, just deep weariness. "I'm doing what I can, Elizabeth. Life is like that. One day up, another down." "Yeah, looks like your down has arrived," she laughed. "I came to get that dinner set my mother gave me. It's in the house, it was. The bank took everything," Robert lied. "There's nothing left there." "Even that?" she asked, irritated. "You couldn't even save that." "I couldn't save our marriage, Elizabeth. Was I going to save a dinner set?" he replied in a low voice. The answer disarmed her. Brandon, sensing the victim was winning the argument, honked. "Let's go, dear. This place gives me allergies." Elizabeth shot him a look, but obeyed. "Goodbye, Robert, and good luck. You're going to need it." The car left, raising dust that covered Robert and his cottage. Robert stood still for a minute. The dust settled. He looked at the board he was nailing. Then he laughed, a low laugh that started in his chest and grew. He laughed at their audacity, at their blindness. They really believed it. They saw a dirty, tired man, but didn't see the fire in his eyes. He entered the shed. The place was simple but clean. The renovation was a facade. Inside, the place was functional. Hidden under a loose floorboard, there was a satellite phone and a modern laptop. He opened the device, connected to the internet, opened his bank account, not the account Elizabeth knew, which was empty, but the international account in Switzerland, where most of his money had been transferred over the past 6 months. The balance was 9 digits. He smiled. "Good luck, Elizabeth. You're going to need it." He closed the computer and went back to the porch. He picked up the hammer. He had a board to nail. The role of the broke old man demanded dedication, and Robert was a very dedicated man. While Robert nailed boards and ate beans with rice cooked on the wood stove, the gears of his plan turned silently and efficiently miles away. The secret architect of this operation, the only man Robert trusted with his life, was Sam. Sam wasn't just an accountant, he was Robert's childhood friend. They grew up together, swam in the same stream, and shared their first dreams. While Robert chose the land, Sam chose books, graduated in accounting and then in business law. He was the financial brain behind Robert's empire, a discreet man with glasses, whom no one in the county would ever notice. They met secretly every 15 days, not at the ranch, but in a small neighboring town, at a roadside diner, in the middle of the night. Robert arrived in his old pickup, looking just like a farmer going to buy supplies early. Sam arrived in a popular rental car, so as not to draw attention. "It's working better than I imagined," said Robert, dipping a piece of bread in his coffee with milk. It was 3 in the morning. "They took the bait," Sam replied, opening his briefcase on the plastic table. The cattle auction was a success. The money is clean and invested in low-risk funds. The sale of the tractors, too. The main house is advertised for such an absurd price that no one will buy it, which gives us time. And Elizabeth? And the little lawyer? Robert asked. Sam pulled out some papers. Brandon, a mediocre lawyer with a high opinion of himself. He's paying for everything on credit cards, dinners, clothes for her. He's getting into debt, thinking he'll cover everything with your money in the divorce. Good, said Robert with a cold smile. But there's a problem, Robert. Or rather, an opportunity, said Sam, adjusting his glasses. Brandon is getting impatient. He's not rich like you. He's upper middle class, lives on appearances. He needs money fast. He started investigating your bankruptcy. Investigating? How? Robert asked, alert. He hired a private investigator in Nevada to trace your finances, to see if you didn't hide money. Robert laughed. And what did he find? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The transfers abroad were made through so many layers of companies that it would be impossible to trace without an international court order. And for that, he would need to prove a crime which doesn't exist. For all intents and purposes, you made bad deals and went broke. His investigator only found debts. Great. So where's the opportunity? Robert asked. Sam leaned over the table. The opportunity is that a man desperate for money is a careless man. Brandon is looking for a shortcut. He wants to pull off a masterstroke, and I think we should give him one. Robert looked at him. What do you have in mind? Brandon likes to think he's smart, likes insider information. Let's create one for him. Let's invent the deal of his life. Something so good, so profitable, that he won't be able to resist. Sam's plan was simple and genius. They would create the perfect bait. Sam had contacts in the financial market. They would plant a rumor about a new feed technology that doubled cattle weight in half the time. A new company based in the Cayman Islands would be opening its capital to selected investors. But how do we make him bite the bait? Robert asked. We don't. He'll come looking for us, said Sam. Brandon thinks you're a fool. But he knows you used to be a king. He must think that you, even broke, still have contacts in the cattle world. He'll try to use you. And so, the next step was defined. Robert returned to his cottage, to his life of misery. But now he had a new role. A few more weeks passed. Elizabeth and Brandon's life was all parties and dinners, but in the luxurious apartment, behind closed doors, the conversation was different. Brandon, my credit card bill came in absurd, Elizabeth complained. Pay with the money you have, dear. Mine is all invested, he lied. The truth was, he was at his limit. The investigator cost a lot and found nothing. The divorce lawsuit was stalled as Robert's bankruptcy prevented any division of assets. Brandon was bankrolling Elizabeth and she was expensive. But I don't have that much. I thought you... I'll handle it, he growled, the gentleman's mask falling. That old man, he hid something. I know he did. I just need to find it. The next day, Brandon had an idea. He would look for Robert, not to threaten, but to propose a deal. He would pretend compassion. He drove to the ranch, this time alone. He found Robert weeding a small plot of land where he had planted some vegetables. Robert, he called, stopping at a safe distance from the mud. Robert raised his sweaty face, wiped his hand on his pants, and approached the fence. Doctor. Look, Robert, I know we're on opposite sides, Brandon began with his best lawyer voice. But I'm not a bad man. I see what you're going through. It's sad. Robert just watched without saying anything. Elizabeth is worried. She feels sorry. She wants the divorce, of course, but she wants it to be amicable. And so do I. Maybe I can help. Help? How? Are you going to give me money? Robert mocked. No, but you know the cattle market. You still have contacts. I have money. If you give me a tip, information about cheap land, a business opportunity, I'll come in with capital, and from what I earn, I'll give you a commission so you can get back on your feet. There was the bait. The fish was on the hook, and he himself was asking for the worm. Robert feigned distrust. I don't know. My contacts don't want to talk to me anymore after I went broke. Try, Brandon insisted. Anything, a hidden auction, anything. Think about it, Robert. It would be good for you and good for Elizabeth. Brandon left his business card on the fence. Call me if you know of something. Think of this as an advance for peace in the divorce. He left, feeling like the smartest man in the world. He was manipulating the old man, using the only thing he had left, his old network of contacts. Robert picked up the card, looked at it and smiled. That night he made the call to Sam. He bit Sam, he came to me. He wants a tip. Perfect, said Sam. Get ready. In a week, we'll give him the tip that will change his life forever. The secret architect and the cattle rancher were ready for the final phase. The trap was set. All that was left was the lawyer's greed to do the rest. Brandon's life was becoming a nightmare, disguised as a dream. Publicly, he was the man who had saved beautiful Elizabeth from the clutches of a bankrupt husband. He was the successful lawyer, the new king of the county. But privately, the bills were piling up. Elizabeth was a high-maintenance woman. She didn't understand credit card limits. She only understood desires, and Brandon, to maintain the facade of a rich and powerful man, gave in. He was using his overdraft limit, took out a personal loan to renovate the office, and was diverting, with small frauds, money from court costs from his clients. He was sinking and needed a quick way out. The proposal he made to Robert was his lifeboat. He was convinced that the old man, in his misery, would accept any crumbs to get revenge on the situation. He just didn't count on the crumbs being such a well-prepared bait. A week passed. Brandon was already getting anxious, thinking Robert wouldn't call, until on a Tuesday night his cell phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Brandon answered impatiently. Doctor? Robert's voice sounded low, almost clandestine. It's me, Robert. Brandon straightened in his chair, gestured to Elizabeth, who was watching TV, to be quiet. Robert, good that you called. Did you get something? I don't know if it's something, said Robert, feigning hesitation. It's risky and I have no way to get in, but it's from an old contact of mine. Something big, but it has to be fast. What is it? Speak, said Brandon, his heart beating faster. It's a foreign company called Cattle Nutri. They invented a new feed. They say cattle fatten at double the speed. They're looking for an angel investor here in the United States before they go public on the stock market. It's a unique chance, but the initial investment is high. Very high. How high? Brandon asked. $500,000, Robert lied, throwing out the number he knew Brandon didn't have, but would make him salivate. $500,000, Brandon repeated. He didn't have even a tenth of that. No, that's too much for me. I warned you, said Robert, pretending to end the conversation. Well, that was it. Good night, Doctor. Wait, Brandon shouted. Don't hang up. Isn't there a way to get in with less? Isn't there an investor fund? I'm a lawyer. I understand these things. I can structure it. Look, Doctor, my contact told me they're doing a presentation tomorrow at a hotel in Dallas, by invitation only. If you want to go, it's at your own risk. I don't even have money for the trip there. Send me the address now, Brandon ordered. Robert gave him the address of a luxury hotel in Dallas. The event was real. Sam had rented a conference room and hired professional actors to pose as foreign executives. Cattle Nutri was a shell company registered by Sam in the Cayman Islands, with a nice website and impressive graphics. The next day, Brandon took his imported Mercedes and drove for 3 hours to Dallas. He told Elizabeth it was a last-minute hearing for an important client. He arrived at the hotel and was impressed. The room was opulent. There were about 10 other people, all actors, paid by Sam, looking like serious investors. The CEO of Cattle Nutri, a man with a British accent, made an impeccable presentation, showed digitally created videos of cattle growing, profit projection graphs that rose vertiginously. At the end, he announced, "We're opening a seed investment round. The minimum amount for entry is $200,000. Brandon broke out in a cold sweat. 200,000. He didn't have it, but the opportunity. If those graphs were 10% true, he would make millions. He could get rid of Elizabeth, pay his debts, and live like a king. Greed completely clouded his judgment. He sought out the CEO at the end. "My name is Brandon. I'm a lawyer. I'm very interested. But 200,000 is a high amount for a single person. Would you accept a pool of investors? I can raise it." The CEO, instructed by Sam for this exact situation, pretended to think, "Normally no, but I liked you. If you bring 400,000 by the end of the week, I'll give you a seat on the board." 400,000. He doubled the bet. Brandon left the hotel dizzy. He needed 400,000 and only knew one way to get it. He returned to Houston and went straight to his office. He started calling his richest clients. "I have a unique investment opportunity, fast 300% return in 6 months, but I need your answer today. Greed is contagious." In 2 days, using his credibility as a successful lawyer and the promise of absurd profits, he convinced 3 of his clients to enter. He got 300,000. He was missing 100. He looked at his own account. He didn't have it. Then he did the unthinkable. There was a client, an elderly man, who had won a large settlement, and the money was sitting in the court account, waiting for the judge's release. Brandon, as a lawyer, had access. He would make the illegal transfer and return the money before anyone noticed. It was a high-risk move. It was a crime, but he was blind. He transferred the 100,000 from the client, completed the 400,000, called Cattle Nutri, and transferred all the money to the indicated offshore account. That night, he opened the most expensive wine he had. Elizabeth found him in the living room smiling. "What's with that face? Did we win the lottery?" she joked. "Better, dear, much better. I just closed the deal of my life. In 6 months we're moving out of this little town. We're going to Europe." Elizabeth clapped. "I knew it. I knew you were a winner, not like that." "That one?" "Exactly," said Brandon, raising his glass. "A toast to us and a toast to that idiot Robert, who gave me the tip. The old fool, even broke, still served me for something." They laughed loudly, not knowing that miles away, in the ranch shed, Robert and Sam were looking at a computer screen, seeing the confirmation of the transfer of $400,000 to Sam's account. "They bit," said Robert, his voice low. "They swallowed the hook, the line and the sinker," Sam corrected. "Now, Robert, it's time to pull." "Not yet," said Robert. "Let them enjoy the victory. Let them feel like kings of the world for a few more days. The fall will be much greater." Robert knew that patience was the hunter's greatest virtue, and he had been hunting patiently for months. The final phase of Brandon's humiliation was complete. Now it was time to prepare his own resurrection. With the deal of a lifetime closed, Brandon should have been relaxed, but he was the opposite. He had committed a serious crime by diverting the client's money. Although the promise of profit was enormous, the tension of being discovered began to gnaw at him. He became paranoid. He checked the client's court account statement hourly, hoping to see some movement. His arrogance with Elizabeth also increased. The gentleman's mask was definitely on the floor. "You bought another shoe, Elizabeth," he yelled upon seeing a bag from an expensive store on the bed. "You think money grows on trees?" "But dear, you said we were rich," she replied confused. "I said we're going to be rich. Until then, control yourself. You're costing me a fortune." Elizabeth was shocked. It was the first time he spoke to her that way. The sweet, understanding man who rescued her from the ranch was transforming into a petty, stressed monster. Life in the luxury apartment began to seem less like paradise and more like a gilded cage. Brandon was always at the office or locked on the phone, speaking low and angrily. One afternoon, bored and feeling lonely, Elizabeth decided to drive. She had nowhere to go. The city friends envied her and talked about her behind her back. Aimlessly, she took the road that led to the ranch. She told herself she was just going to see the state of the property to know what she could demand in the divorce. But it was a lie. She was curious about Robert. She parked Brandon's Mercedes far away near the gate and went on foot. She didn't want to be seen by him. She approached stealthily to the shed where he lived. The cottage seemed even more miserable than last time, but something was different. Robert was there, but he wasn't weeding or nailing boards. He was sitting on the porch in an old rocking chair and was reading a book. Beside him, on a makeshift table made from a crate, was a thermos of coffee. He seemed calm, peaceful. She hid behind a tree and watched. He didn't look like a defeated man. He looked at peace. He got up, stretched, and went to the small wood-burning stove in the back. He began to prepare something to eat, humming an old song she hadn't heard in years. A strange feeling came over Elizabeth. She remembered life with Brandon. The apartment was silent, cold. They only ate restaurant food or frozen food. Brandon never hummed. He only gave orders or complained. She looked at Robert. He was thinner, yes, and the clothes were old, but he was healthy. The sun had given him a tan, and his movements were firm. He didn't look like a man at rock bottom. Suddenly he stopped what he was doing. He looked directly toward the tree where she was hiding. "Are you going to stay in the bushes, Elizabeth?" The coffee's still hot. Her heart raced. He saw her. She came out from behind the tree awkwardly. "I was just passing by. I came to see if the main house was still standing." "It's there just the same," he said, turning back to the stove. He didn't invite her to approach. "You look well," she said, taking a few hesitant steps toward the fence. "I'm alive." "For a broke man, that's a lot," he replied without looking at her. "What do you want, Elizabeth? Did you come to laugh some more? Bring your little lawyer to take pictures of my misery?" "No, I just—" she stammered. She looked at the man she had despised. He was poor, lived in a shed, but for the first time in months he seemed stronger than Brandon. There was a dignity in him that money couldn't buy and bankruptcy couldn't take away. "I miss you," she lied, or perhaps it was half true. She missed the security he represented, the calm he had. Robert finally turned and faced her. His eyes were cold as steel. "No, Elizabeth, you don't miss me. You miss my money. And since it's gone, you left. Now please leave my property. You're no longer welcome here." "Property? Soon. Half of this will be mine," she retorted, the anger returning. "Will it? Half of nothing is still nothing, Elizabeth. Now go. You're scaring the birds." She turned red with anger. "You're going to regret this, you rude old man. I'm going to take everything from you down to the last chicken." She turned her back and marched out, furious. She returned to Brandon's Mercedes, trembling. How dare he, the broke man, dare to speak to her that way? But as she drove back to Houston, the anger gave way to a seed of doubt. His calmness, his confidence. Where did a broke man get so much confidence? He kicked her out. He didn't seem afraid of her or her lawyer. She arrived at the apartment and found Brandon in panic. "Where were you? Where were you with my car?" he yelled. "I went for a drive." "For a drive? What if you crashed the car? Do you know how much insurance costs?" "What's happening, Brandon? You're a nervous wreck." "I thought we were rich." "We are. We're going to be," he said, running his hands through his hair. "It's just the stress of the deal. A lot of things to manage." "What deal? You don't tell me anything," she accused. "Man, stuff you wouldn't understand," he growled. At that moment, Elizabeth realized the trade she had made. She traded a countryman who treated her as a partner even though she didn't want to be one, for a city man who treated her like an expensive, dumb accessory. The seed of doubt was planted. She began to wonder, what if Robert wasn't so broke? What if his calm wasn't peace, but certainty of something she didn't know? She shook her head. Impossible. She saw the empty house, the shed. He was finished. But for the first time, she wasn't so sure she had made the best deal. Life with Brandon was cold, and she was beginning to miss the warmth, not the love, but the security that Robert's empire, even in ruins, still seemed to emanate. The days turned into weeks. Brandon was living on the edge of paranoia. The client from whom he diverted the money began asking about the release of the settlement. The judge had signed, but the money wasn't in the account. "There was an error in the bank system, Doctor," Brandon lied, sweating cold on the phone. "I'm handling it, it's bureaucracy stuff." He needed the cattle nutri profit to come in soon. He sent daily emails to the CEO, but the responses were getting vague. Awaiting customs clearance, logistical problems, the market is adjusting. Meanwhile, Robert and Sam prepared the final blow. The trap wasn't just the fake investment. The trap was Brandon's own greed. Sam, using his contacts, made an anonymous report to the Texas Bar Association and the Public Prosecutor's Office about strange movements in court accounts managed by Brandon. He didn't mention the diversion yet, just enough for an audit to be initiated. The second part of the trap was planted in Brandon's office. Robert, who still had friends in the county, paid the cleaning lady who cleaned Brandon's office to forget a small digital recorder under the lawyer's desk. Brandon, desperate for money, began making calls to his investors. "I need another contribution. Customs blocked the first shipment of feed. We need another 50,000 to grease the right hands." His clients, who had invested in the promise of easy profit, were now being coerced to pay more, and the recorder captured everything: the veiled threats, the false promises, and then the coup de grace. Sam sent an email to all cattle nutri investors, including Brandon. The email was short and came from an anonymous address. Cattle Nutri was investigated for fraud in its country of origin. Assets were frozen, the website went down, the money is gone, you fell for a scam. When Brandon read the email, his world collapsed. He tried to access the Cattle Nutri website offline. He called the CEO. The number no longer existed. $400,000, $300,000 from his clients, and $100,000 from a court account, all evaporated. He fell into the chair. He was ruined. More than ruined. He was a criminal. He would be arrested. He would be hunted by the clients he deceived. He began to shake uncontrollably. Elizabeth entered the room, coming from the bedroom. "Brandon, what happened? You're pale. Get out of here," he yelled. "Get out. Was it you? Was it you and that old husband of yours? This is your fault?" "My fault." "What?" she asked, scared. "The money's gone. Everything's gone." "What money? The business money?" she asked, panic beginning to take hold of her too. "Yes, the money I invested, the money that was going to save us. It was a scam. And I know who gave me the tip." He got up, his eyes red with fury. "It was Robert, the old bastard. He set me up." "Robert?" Elizabeth laughed nervously. "How? He doesn't even have a place to fall dead. He's an ignorant man, a cattle rancher. He used me," Brandon yelled, throwing a vase at the wall. "He pretended to be a fool, and I fell for it." He grabbed Elizabeth by the shoulders. "Where is he? I'm going to kill that old man." "I don't know. Let me go," she screamed, scared by his violence. The office phone rang. Brandon let go of Elizabeth and answered, his hands shaking. "Hello." "Dr. Brandon," said a cold official voice. "This is the Texas Bar Association. We're in your building's lobby. We need to do an audit of your files. Now." Brandon dropped the phone. The bar. They knew. The diverted client must have reported. It was all over. He looked at Elizabeth, at the luxury apartment. The trap wasn't just the money, it was everything. He ran to the bedroom. Elizabeth followed him. "What are you going to do?" He was throwing clothes into a suitcase. "I'm going to disappear, and you, if you're smart, disappear too. The men I deceived, they won't forgive me and they won't forgive you." You deceived your clients?" she asked, her voice failing. "I did what I had to do," he yelled. "Now get out of my way." He pushed her aside and ran out of the apartment. Elizabeth stood in the living room, the sound of the broken vase on the floor, the phone off the hook, and the buzzing of the intercom, with the doorman announcing the arrival of the bar association. She was alone. Brandon had abandoned her. The money was gone, and she, for the first time, realized the size of the hole she had gotten herself into. She wasn't the partner of a rich lawyer. She was the accomplice of a con artist, and she was about to pay the price. The scandal exploded. The news of Brandon's flight and the $1 million fraud made the front page of the county newspaper. The deceived clients were furious, and Elizabeth's name was on everyone's lips, not as Robert's victim, but as the lawyer con artist's accomplice. The Texas Bar Association revoked Brandon's license, and an arrest warrant was issued. The luxury apartment was sealed by the courts to pay part of the debts. Elizabeth was evicted with only the clothes on her back and her suitcases. She was interrogated by the police. She cried, said she knew nothing, that she had also been deceived, but no one believed her. She was the woman who lived with him, who spent the money. She was released, but indicted as an accomplice. She was alone, without money, and with her name in the mud. While the county boiled over with Brandon's scandal, another much quieter event was underway. It was the day of the big annual cattle auction in the region. The event was weak. With Robert's collapse, the region's biggest buyer, prices were low and the mood was gloomy. The auctioneer banged the gavel without enthusiasm. Lot 23, 10 heifers, going once, going twice. Suddenly, the auction barn doors opened. Sunlight entered, and with it a figure that made everyone turn. It was Robert, but not the Robert from the shed, not the dirty man in old clothes and unshaven. It was the Robert from before, freshly bathed, haircut and beard shaved. He wore new boots that shone, clean pants and a well-pressed shirt. He wasn't in a suit. He was dressed as a cattle rancher, but the cattle rancher everyone remembered, the king of the region. Beside him was Sam, the accountant, carrying a briefcase. A silence fell over the place. People didn't know what to think. Was it a ghost? Robert walked calmly down the aisle, greeting some acquaintances with a nod. He went to the front row, which had always been his place, and sat down. The auctioneer stuttered. Lot 23, sold. Next lot. Lot 24, the champion bull, the best of the fair. It was the most expensive animal of the day. The bidding started low, 10,000, 11, 12. When the bid stopped at 15,000, Robert raised his hand. 20, he said, his voice calm and strong, echoing through the barn. Everyone looked. 20,000. Another rancher, a rival, covered. 21. Robert, 30. The barn held its breath, from 21 to 30. This wasn't a bid, it was a statement. The rival shook his head and gave up. 30,000. Going once, going twice. The auctioneer looked at Robert, who smiled and waved. Sold to Robert. A wave of applause started timidly, then grew. Robert was back, but he wasn't done. Mr. Auctioneer, said Robert, standing up, I'm in a bit of a hurry today. I'll cover the appraisal price of all remaining lots, from 25 to the last. I'll buy everything. The auctioneer dropped the gavel. Buy everything? There were more than 50 lots. It was a fortune. But Mr. Robert, what about payment? The organizer stammered. Sam stepped forward and handed the briefcase to the organizer. The transfer was made 5 minutes ago. The total amount plus 10% bonus for the inconvenience. You can check. The organizer looked at his phone, the account statement. The money was there, an amount he had never seen at once. The news left the auction even before Robert. Robert wasn't broke. He bought the entire fare. He's richer than ever. He left the auction in his pickup, a brand new one, which he had bought in Dallas and kept hidden. He drove to town. He stopped in front of the real estate agency that was selling his house. He entered. The realtor almost fell out of his chair. Robert, what a surprise. I came to take down the sign on my house, said Robert. It's no longer for sale. But what about the debts? The bank? What bank? Robert asked. I own the bank." It was an exaggeration, but not by much. Sam had used Robert's money to buy a large amount of shares in the regional bank that was supposedly foreclosing on him. The resurrection was complete. In less than 3 hours, Robert went from broke old man to the most powerful man in the region. The same people who looked with pity now looked at him with fear and admiration. He returned to the ranch. The employees he had fired were already there, called by Sam. They were cleaning the main house, bringing the furniture back from storage. The ranch was alive again. Robert went to the shed where he had lived for the past few months. He looked at the simple cottage. He had learned a lot there. He learned he could live with little, and he learned who Elizabeth really was. He took out the satellite phone and laptop from under the floor. He gave them to Sam. "I don't need this anymore." He picked up the book he was reading on the porch, sat down and continued reading, while his house, his empire, was being restored around him. He was waiting for one last visit, and it wouldn't be long in coming. Elizabeth was sitting on the curb in the main square. The sun was hot. She hadn't eaten since the day before. People passed and looked at her with contempt. The Queen was now a beggar. She had nowhere to go. Her parents had already passed away. Her friends didn't answer her calls. She was completely alone with a police investigation on her back. Then she heard the rumors like a wind. The news swept the county. Robert bought the auction. Robert is rich. She didn't believe it. It was impossible, until she saw him. He passed through the square, not in the old pickup, but in the new one. The pickup stopped. The dark electric window rolled down. It was him, clean, strong, and with a look she didn't recognize. It wasn't hate, it was indifference. "Get in," he said. She hesitated. What did she have to lose? She got up, cleaned her expensive dress, now dirty, and got into the luxury car. The smell of new leather made her want to cry. The silence on the trip to the ranch was total. Robert didn't say a word. He just drove. When they arrived, the ranch was transformed. There were employees everywhere. The new cattle he bought was being unloaded. The main house shone. He parked in front. "Get out." She got out. He guided her not inside the house, but to the porch. He sat in his old rocking chair, which the employees had put back in place. "I don't understand, Robert. The bankruptcy, the bank," she stammered. "There was never a bankruptcy, Elizabeth," he said calmly. "There was never debt. There was a plan." She stared at him. "A plan?" "A plan to see how far your greed would go. A plan to see who you really were." Elizabeth's eyes widened. "You did all this on purpose? You made me believe we were poor?" "I didn't have to do much," he said. "You wanted to believe. At the first sign of difficulty, you traded me for the first one who offered you a shiny car. You didn't abandon me because I was broke, Elizabeth. You abandoned me because you thought I was a fool. You abandoned me for him. Brandon," she spat the name. "He deceived me. He deceived all of us. Robert, dear, I was a fool. I saw the mistake I made. He used me." "Yes, he used you," Robert agreed. "He used you, and I used his greed to catch both of you." "You?" she asked, confused. "The scam, Cattle Nutri, the tip I gave him, the fake company, the money he stole from clients. It's all saved in an account Sam opened. It's going to be returned to each of them, minus the lawyer's money. That will pay for the operation's costs." Elizabeth was white. She wasn't talking to the cattle rancher. She was talking to a player, a master. "Robert, please," she knelt. The tears were now real. Tears of dread. "I have nowhere to go. I'm your wife. Forgive me. I'll do whatever you want. I'll clean the floor. I'll take care of you." "I learned my lesson." She tried to hug his legs. Robert looked at her with deep sadness. "You learned the wrong lesson, Elizabeth. You're not sorry for betraying me. You're sorry for betting on the wrong horse." He stood up and she fell, sitting on the floor. "I loved you, Elizabeth. I would have given you the world, but the world I had, the one of working the land, wasn't enough for you. You wanted the shine. Well, now the shine is gone." "What are you going to do with me?" she cried. "Me? Nothing." He went to the door, called Sam, who was waiting inside. Sam came out with a small suitcase and a folder. "Your lawyer, Brandon, before fleeing, signed the divorce papers." He thought he was signing the cattle nutri papers. "He really is a terrible lawyer," said Sam. "You're free, Elizabeth," said Robert. "The divorce was signed. You're no longer my wife." "But my rights, my half," she shouted, standing up. "Your half of what? Of the debts your accomplice left. By law, you, as his partner, are responsible for his frauds. Or—" Sam opened the folder. "You can sign this paper." "What is this?" she asked suspiciously. "It's an agreement. You give up everything, anything of mine, from the past, the present, and the future. In return, I convince Brandon's clients not to include you in the lawsuit. I pay the debts he made, and you leave clean." She stared at him. It was a joke. She was leaving with nothing. "And if I don't sign," she challenged. "Then," said Sam, "the police are waiting at the gate to take you for complicity in fraud and embezzlement. The choice is yours." Elizabeth looked at the gate. She saw the reflection of sunlight on the police car. She took the pen from Sam's hand. With hatred, she signed the paper. "It's over," she snarled. "Almost," said Robert. He picked up the small suitcase. "I'm not a monster. Here are some of your clothes I kept. And here," he took an envelope from his pocket, "there's enough money for a bus ticket far away from here and for you to get established for a month until you find a job." She took the envelope. "A job?" She laughed hysterically. "Me work?" "Yes, like everyone else," said Robert. "Now go and remember what I said. That door, once closed." Elizabeth picked up the suitcase. She looked at the house that was hers, at the man who was hers. She said nothing, turned her back and started walking. She passed through the gate. The police car, seeing she wasn't arrested, left. She continued walking down the dirt road, pulling her suitcase alone in the dust. Robert watched her until she became a speck in the distance. Sam approached. "Are you okay, my friend?" Robert took a deep breath of the ranch air, the smell of cattle, of wet earth. He smiled. "Couldn't be better, Sam. Couldn't be better." He turned and entered his house. The plan was over.